We went to Singapore in 1978,
Yeah.
after we'd been in Chicago a couple of years. Singapore was a centrum. I was assigned to development or fundraising, and David was in management with Roxana Harper and Alice Wright. He had a job at National Semiconductor, and they would occasionally call him at work to ask particular management kind of questions. And his secretary at one point said, "It's one of your wives."
Because Roxana would be calling me with her question. Roxana Harper would be calling you a question about management, or Mrs. Wright, or what? Alice Wright would call about some question about finance. And it was, I forgot about that. And
My development treks took me to Australia at one point. It must have been December, because walking down the streets of Sydney, they were playing White Christmas on the loudspeakers, and all these guys were running around in shorts, and it was quite warm. Hardly a white Christmas. At that point, I got out to Murren Bridge with the Vosslers, and I don't remember that we raised a whole lot of money, but it certainly was an interesting trip. Raising funds for the new projects in Bubun and Bantoa, Indonesia,
and Samoa,
and yeah,
American Samoa.
American Samoa. Some private sector funding, but mostly government, I think. Australian government. And
Australia had a relationship with South Asia, Malaysia particularly, Malaysia and Indonesia. And when you certainly they had an economic trade relationship, and they certainly had a relationship during World War II when the war was on. That's where Australians were involved in the war. So there was logically a relationship with those projects associated with Australia, and their own projects too. But the ones we were starting there were later, and so we went to them for money.
David got a job there with National Semiconductor, and National Semiconductor treated us as if we were expat employees and provided all our appliances, a new stove, a new refrigerator, washer, dryer, color TV. So all of this stuff came into the house, and it was a big celebration. And then he was unable to get a work permit, and we couldn't figure out why. Was it because he'd taken a job that was supposed to go to a Chinese person? We didn't know. But we thought it had something to do with the ICA. So Harry Wainwright and Ray Spencer came over to see if they could work through the government structures and figure out what had gone wrong. We eventually had to leave because David couldn't get a work permit. And I'll let David take the story from there.
We found out many, many years later that when John Epps went to get a work permit in Singapore, that he asked the man why we had been asked to leave. The ICA was persona non grata at that time, and he said that before we were even there, we had held a meeting in some village
The ICA.
in a suburb And the ICA had held a meeting, which probably was a town meeting, in preparation for asking that village to be one of the initial projects. And we had a poster on the wall that said all the goods belong to all the people. So they had the impression that we were communist, and the Singapore government is very, very anti-communist. So that was what went in the record and got established as to who we were, but we never could find it out at the time. This was just learned about 3 or 4 years ago.